And so I started teaching Pilates. I ended up teaching that for about 12 years and had my own private Pilates studio. And it was through teaching Pilates that was a huge part of my healing from bulimia. But B, I was being surrounded by 10 different belief systems every single day of different ways of surviving, thriving, and seeing these different stories come into and out of my space every day. And it allowed me to shake up my own story about what was possible and then question what could be possible for other people's bodies, for other people's lives. And I saw a correlation that it didn't matter whether somebody was technically fat or technically thin, or whether they ate really healthy or whether they really didn't, or whether they worked out 5 times a day or like once a week. What mattered was their mindset around how they thought about their bodies. Because of working on their mindset and because of the way I worked with the body, it allowed for them to have these results that was really transformative.
Hey guys, welcome to episode number 174 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. You're going to be happy you popped on today because I am bringing you Coach Kimberly Spencer. This woman is amazing. She cured herself from bulimia, amazing, and then used the same philosophy, mindset work, and perspective changes to grow her business and heal her relationship to money, which you know makes my socks roll up and down. What Kimberly does is really look at like the cobwebs of your unconscious in your business and figure out where you are holding things back. And she has this belief in her business and in her work with her clients that the reason you don't have what you want is because of the story you're telling yourself, which made me really, really happy. And her life's work is really proof of that. I mean, that she's been able to expand her life the way that she has because she started asking better questions, because she changed her environment, because she changed who she was hanging out with, which I believe is so critical to your success. She was able to transform every single aspect of her life that she wanted to transform. So is this about understanding your business and your business growth and your relationship to money? You bet. Is it also about why you're being unkind to your body or why your relationship isn't working or why you're not making as much as you want? Yes. Also, yes. So I want you to just pop in those earphones. I want you to really listen in. And I want for you, my assignment for you in this podcast episode, if you use it wisely, is to figure out where in your life you have a story that's holding you back. So as you listen to Kimberly, try to find that for yourself. And I bet something amazing will transform in your life just because you decided to listen to this episode. All right, pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Kimberly, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Same here, Sarah. Thanks so much. And by the way, the title of your podcast is just like such like a kick you in the pants, get started. Like, let's go. Let's dive
I
in.
love that. All right. So Kimberly, I want to know before we dive into all the gooey goodness about the humanity behind the woman who's running a business, right? Is why do you do what you do? Tell us what you do and why it's what you do.
I've always been in the business of transforming people's stories. I started out in Hollywood as a screenwriter, writing films. When that dream was fulfilled at 24, I realized I was only about 90% fulfilled. And I was like, that's interesting. Lifelong childhood dream, seeing my name up on the big screen, script produced, picked up by Lionsgate, going to Netflix. And I was like, well, what gives? So I got curious. And simultaneously, while I was supporting myself in Hollywood, I was teaching Pilates. And I'd found Pilates after I was struggling. I'd been battling bulimia for about 10 years. And I found Pilates because a friend of mine from acting class was like, hey, I'm doing this. And I was like, ooh, celebrities do Pilates. I should do that too. And I tried it. And it was the first time I was like, oh my God, I felt good in my body. And that was such a foreign sensation for me, where I was like, I felt strong. I felt confident. I didn't feel like I didn't know what I was doing. I felt very guided and supported. And I was like, I need to teach this. I need to help other women like feel like this. And so I started teaching Pilates. I ended up teaching that for about 12 years and had my own private Pilates studio. And it was through teaching Pilates that was a huge part of my healing from bulimia. But B, I was being surrounded by 10 different belief systems every single day of different ways of surviving, thriving, and seeing these different stories come into and out of my space every day. And it allowed me to shake up my own story about what was possible and then question what could be possible for other people's bodies, for other people's lives. And I saw a correlation that it didn't matter whether somebody was technically fat or technically thin, or whether they ate really healthy or whether they really didn't, or whether they worked out 5 times a day or like once a week. What mattered was their mindset around how they thought about their bodies to the correlation of the results that they were getting. And I saw how I was able to transform people's stories about what was possible, whether it was post-pregnancy or post-surgery or post-injury. And because of working on their mindset and because of the way I worked with the body, it allowed for them to have these results that was really transformative. Well, fast forward, after my film was picked up, I had the opportunity to come on board as a consultant for a back stretching device that was being taken to market. And I saw this product, and I've always been really audacious with my career ass. And I saw it, and I saw the value. I saw immediately how to pitch it and sell it to Pilates studios and chiropractors. And I said, I don't just want to be a consultant. I want to be a partner. And so I jumped on board this as a partner for 2 years to take this e-commerce startup to the world. And we got it, the product featured in national magazines, up on big billboards in Times Square, like grew the product base, grew our client base, our customer base, got a doctor recommended, all the things, got it pitched to the first round of Shark Tank auditions. And then 3 months before I was supposed to get married, my business partner says he wants to buy me out. And I was devastated, crushed. He says our partnership is over. We'd been having trouble as a partnership for a while. And my husband was very secretly grateful that that was the case, because he's like, you're waking up at 3 a.m. answering emails in a panic. You're having night sweats. You've gained weight. Not that you're not beautiful, but just you're not taking care of yourself because you're so stressed. So I ended up going through a 3-month buyout process with negotiations where lawyers brought everything to my attention that was a deep-seated fear that I thought I'd healed in some other area of my life, where, my education or lack thereof, or how young I was, or how girly I was, or how experienced I was, everything that I'd healed in other areas. And because they were professionals, my unconscious mind decided to accept that as true to a degree. And so I went off, we signed the buyout agreement 3 weeks before I got married. I went off on my honeymoon, and we were spending 6 weeks in Italy, which is a great place to stay for a getaway. And I was brainstorming with my husband on what do I do when I get back? I don't have a job. I don't have a business anymore. I felt like everything had been ripped out from under me of something I'd been working so hard for. And I looked at all these varied careers. I was like, I've been an actor. I've been a screenwriter. I've been a Pilates instructor. I've had my own studio. I've had an e-commerce company. I saw this correlation of I'd healed myself from bulimia. I'd finally found the love of my life and healed myself from very narcissistic relationships. And I was like, I think I got something figured out with this holistic success piece. And I'd been in pageants. Pageants was actually a huge piece to my bulimia recovery, believe it or not. And I leaped off the couch and I said, crown yourself. And my husband's like, what's that? I said, that's the name of my company. And he said, what do you do? I said, I don't know. I love that. I said, it's something like Marie Forleo. It's I think, I'm going to be speaking. And so I went ahead and did all the things that I see new business owners do. And I bought all the equipment, and I got the domain, and I got the website, and I did the photo shoot, and I looked fabulous, and I hired the stylist and the makeup artist and all the things. And for a year and a half in my business, I made no money. Yeah. Scratch that. I made $100. And as a coach,
hurts.
And it hurt. And in the meantime, because my belief in myself was so low, I didn't even believe in myself to keep running my own Pilates studio. I took a side job teaching Pilates for a chiropractor for less than I was originally paid when I first started teaching 8 years prior. That's how shitty my money mindset was. And I started teaching. I started growing my business. And by that, I mean, I was on my computer all the time. Right. I genuinely don't know what the actual F that I was doing, because my husband had a joke that I couldn't watch, get 15 minutes into a show without opening my computer.
Wow.
And there's no money. Yeah. There was no money. So I was in this cycle, and it wasn't until I found out that I was pregnant in 2016 that I realized that the beliefs, the habits, the attitude that I had around money and my business was the exact same parallel that I had about my body a decade ago when it came to bulimia. Wow. And that was when I realized I needed a process to work through my mindset. And it was a mindset piece. So I knew I could overcome it because I'd done it with bulimia with no psychological or medical intervention. And I knew I also had a 9-month deadline because I had a kid coming. And I knew that the version of me that was who I was being was not the version of me I wanted to raise a child. I wanted my son to see an empowered woman.
Oh my God, I just got chills again for the second time. That feeling, I remember that feeling as well. It was like, it's time to step up. And I think for so many of us, you're hitting on something really cool. I want to talk more about the bulimia and how you did that and that mindset shift, because the second mindset shift you're talking about, right, around the money and the business, it's almost like we need something bigger than us to pull that out. Like you were saying, I've got 9 months. This kid's going to see a different version of woman once they're here, right? And I think that can call a lot of us into action. So how did you do that with bulimia when you had the bigger thing, child, to pull you out of that money mindset and the business? How did you do that around the bulimia? I'm just like, I'm blown away by that. And I absolutely get the parallel, but I'm like, I really want to understand that. I think I want to break that down a little bit.
Yeah. So kids have always been my motivator. Like I've always known that I'd wanted to be a mom. And when I was 18, just gotten 18 or 19. I just gotten certified in Pilates. I was making enough money to move out on my own, got my own apartment. And I was in this space of just like contemplation because I was in a new environment. I'd moved out of the home that I grew up in, and which was very chaotic, quite frankly. My father was an addict for a majority of my life. And so that lends to a lot of chaos and a lot of blame. And there's a test. It's called the ACE test as far as like the childhood development. And if you score a 4 or a 5, then according to this test, you are dangerously at risk for severe depression and anxiety later on in life. I had 8 out of the 10 available, 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Okay. Just making sure everybody heard that. 8 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah. 8 out of 10. 4 out of 10, you're dangerously at risk. I had 8 experiences. And from that space, when I started teaching Pilates on a consistent basis, I was exposing myself to new belief systems. I was seeing, because our brains are wired to survive. And so by exposing yourself to new belief systems, like listening to podcasts like yours, sir, which is why I love going on and listening to podcasts, because what your listeners are doing is they're exposing themselves to new possibilities of how to survive in this world. Because our brain is wired to survive, not to thrive. And so when we can look at, oh my gosh, this person's surviving and they seem to actually be thriving a little bit as well. That was what I was exposed to through all my amazing clients that I was working with. And simultaneously, I was looking around at like what I wanted my life to be. And when I was 19 years old, I made myself a promise that there are enough messed up kids in this world and it doesn't need another one. And I promised myself that I would not have children until I sorted this out.
Wow.
And that was such a commitment that I was like beholden to, like from my gut, because I always knew I wanted to be a mom. It's like a huge part of my soul's purpose on this planet. And I love my kids now. I have 2, because you cannot change in the environment that made you sick. So you have to shift up your environment. That doesn't always mean move, but it does mean like maybe you change up how your environment looks. Maybe you clean up the clutter. Maybe you get some new furniture, but shift it up maybe you throw out some old things. Like shifting your environment is one of the most massive transformative pieces, because your external circumstance will always reflect your internal and vice versa. Environment, future, self. And then 3, I had to banish blame. I had to really stop blaming my father for my bulimia. I had to recognize that for the past 8 years, as it was back then, 8-10 years, that was me shoving my finger down my throat. It was not my father. Yeah. And I had to stop blaming him for that experience, and I had to take responsibility. And it was through that I also then got to have compassion. Like I got to see like my learning that coping mechanism was the same as his addictions. It was just what I learned. It was just my way of learning how to do it. And because of that, it brought out so much more compassion and forgiveness for him and for my mom and for that healing process. But it started with me taking really epic personal responsibility. And then beyond that, because I still wasn't like healed yet, I still hadn't completely transformed, I had to start questioning my own behavior. I had to stop judging myself when I defaulted to what I had known as the default, which was binging and purging, and instead start asking myself some new questions. And I started to look at, well, like what led to that trigger? Like, why did I feel triggered to binge and purge? Like what was what was I feeling before that? What feeling was I trying to suppress?
Yeah.
What feeling was trying to be released? And maybe what was a better, what could be a healthier way of expressing that? What could be, maybe I need to scream into a pillow. Maybe I need to go for a run. But I started to question and go through that awkward phase of learning that most people give up on, which is the conscious incompetence, where you're so clunky and you're like, dang it, I did it again. Like you made the mistake again because you're still learning the new habit. And so I had to give myself so much grace and so much compassion and recognize and take the time and say, it's going to take as long as it takes, but I'm committed to it taking.
I love that. That is such a great, I want that to be like, I say this often, like there's so many phrases I want on bumper stickers. That is one of them. Like, it's just this idea, especially now, I think there's so much around quick fixes and fast and overnight success. And it just is so harmful to having people actually grow, because that is not how it works. Like, it doesn't work that way, right? It works day in and day out. I love what you said about making mistakes, understanding that there was a mistake, and then continuing to move on. I see that especially in my kids. My kids are a little bit older now. They're both teenagers, but I watch that like perfectionism or this expectation that, well, but I already learned that lesson. Shouldn't it be done by now? And it's like, well, if only, right? Like, what a place the world would be if everybody learned lessons the first time through. Like, no, there's stuff to work through. And I think, I mean, I am such an advocate of dropping a victimhood mentality. And I just love that you have stated out loud, that is the first step to healing almost anything. Yeah.
It really is. Like it takes radical ownership to be able, and it's a sucky mirror to look in, because you're like, oh, dang it, there's me without my makeup and all the fancy things of all the blame that I can put on to everybody else. And let me just, I also want to be clear, because I work with a lot of high achievers, that self-blame is not ownership. Like, if you're blaming yourself, you're projecting guilt and shame onto yourself. You're making yourself the villain instead of the victim, which I see with a lot of people who have experienced childhood trauma. It's a very common place to go, because there's a messed up belief system with your just world bias of like, let me just explain the just world bias, because when I learned this, it blew my mind. The just world bias is where we as little children expect the whole world to be fair. It's not. We know that as adults consciously, but there's still that like inner child that's like, please. And so what happens when you've experienced any sort of like childhood trauma or abuse, you recognize like, this isn't fair. But also there's a belief that then I must have done something to justify this. I must have been the villain or something to have I must have created this. And there's something that happens, especially in the coaching world, that I'm like I take my soapbox on, because there's this space of radical ownership to the point where you put yourself at fault for your past. And you put yourself at fault where it's like everything is your fault. No, it is not. It is your responsibility for healing to move from a place of acceptance, but not fault. And so when the just world bias gets really askew, because your perception of what you deserve, it's a perception that you deserve to be punished because you must have done something bad to have this horrible thing happen to you in your childhood, or even as an adult. That it really messes with our perception of what we believe that we deserve. And so we can remedy that, which means not putting ourselves in the villain space. Like, we're neither victim nor villain, but in a place of acceptance of, okay, it is what it is right now. This is what it is. And I can move forward from the place of acceptance, because acceptance is a neutral emotional state. Either victim, you're projecting out, villain, you're projecting in, but there's guilt and shame in both directions. versus true ownership and acceptance means you're just at the starting line. It's neutral.
Wow. Okay. There was so much in that. One of the things that I really loved about this just world bias, I hear this a lot. Not only should life be fair, but I think underneath that too is this belief, if you're good, you'll get what you deserve. It kind of starts with the whole, the Santa Claus type myth, right? Like if you're good, you get what you deserve, kind of a thing. And I've seen that come up in myself. I've seen it in other people of like, person. And it's like, yeah, the universe really doesn't care. It's almost like, and not in a mean way, right? But it's like really wonderful people get cancer. Really great people get in car accidents. Wonderful humans that get taken advantage of in business. Like that just happens. But I love what you're saying about acceptance on the other side of it, because that acceptance neutralizes it into the truth of what it is that we're all human having this experience. And a lot of the experience we don't get to decide until it's on us to choose the response. And that response is the moment in which we have the shift of power and the shift of the experience from it just happening, which it does, to us being able to have some say in what the end result is. And I just think that was so cool what you just said. And now I'm understanding more and more what you were saying about the bulimia and how you were able to work through that, but then also to translate that to healing your relationship to money. So you could actually have a business that paid you more than $100 after spending all that money on photo shoots and websites and all the jazz.
All the fancy jazz.
All
It
the things.
looks good.
Good. Broke AF, but
it was a very sparkly turd. Like that turd was bedazzled.
Oh my gosh, it is so common, right? So freaking common. I knew it when you said it too. I was like, 100. That's actually pretty good for that space people find themselves in of look how great I look, but not understanding the truth of their business or what it is that they're offering. And I think the way I'm viewing your business as we're chatting, you let me know if this is true or not, but the way I view you and what you're bringing to people is sort of what happened to you is this introduction to new ideas, asking better questions, which we know in the coaching world is just so critical because the subconscious mind will answer whatever question you ask it. So if the question is, why do I suck so bad? It will tell you. If the question is, what if this is the best year I ever have? It will tell you how to do that. Like, it's like this thing, right? So you change your environment, you ask better questions, you expose yourself to new ideas. How do you think that translates in what you do with your clients and in really pulling out the best of them? What do you hear is that experience for them?
One of the things that I hear is that when they first come from that place, when they first actually start accepting, like every client I've ever had, there's always been that moment, typically around like a third of the way through our coaching journey, that there is resistance coming up. And there is, sometimes I get it on the second session, just, for those high achievers.
Fast forward, let's go.
Forward, let's go. But the resistance that comes up against like what, and the excuses, my gosh, we are so good at having those excuses. And when we don't have someone to call us out on our own BS, it really, like, one of the greatest disservices that I had in my e-commerce company was the fact that we didn't have a mutual business coach. Because had we had a mutual business coach, we would have known that we were making decisions as leaders on completely different value systems. So when you can understand your value system is one of your subconscious processing systems. When you know what your values are and why something is important to you, that's literally the question you ask, like, why is money important to you? And when I ask that question of my clients in regards to their business, and they give me like their list of however many reasons as to why something is important to them. And I see that one of the things is that they're not making money in their business. It's typically because the value of making money or sales or marketing or something of that language, like income, revenue, cash flow, something of that language, it's whatever is right for you. But if that is not in their top 5, that's one of the number one reasons as to why they're not making money, because the value of money is not there. Just like with me, with bulimia, the value of health, of feeling whole in my body, it wasn't yet there. It was looking good. it was an outward perception of how I thought I needed to look. The same was true when I fixed my business bulimia, in essence. I had to go through the same process. I had to stop blaming my former business partner. I had to take full ownership that my financial debt that I had gotten myself into over that year and a half of making very little was like that was my responsibility. And then I had to start asking myself those better questions. And when I started to look at that from the personal development standpoint, I would set these lofty goals, just like I would with when I was bulimic. I would set these like, I'm going to lose, 40 pounds or whatever, like crazy amount. I didn't have to lose 40 pounds. It was probably
Right.
like,
I was going to say, you probably didn't have 40 to lose.
10.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by this date, and this is what it's going to be. And this is where I get a little, I'm out of alignment with many manifestation coaches who, you write your affirmations. You're like, I'm going to do this by this date, and here's my SMART goal, and here, da, 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 da. Okay, most people starting their businesses are not yet personally developed enough to maintain the responsibility that comes with a multi-6, 7-figure business. That's generally.
I would agree. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And so when I first started my business, I didn't realize that I was going through that same process of healing, of having that shame and guilt of like, why am I not achieving my goals yet? Why am I not like, I'm doing all this work. I'm trying to stay high vibe and like feeling good about everything and making my sales, but I yet did not have the personal development or personal responsibility, to be very specific, of owning my actions of what I was putting as my output. And because of that, that's one of the biggest things that I see with a lot of business leaders is that they want to achieve a next level of power and influence and money and whatnot, but they have to simultaneously accept the amount of responsibility that's coming with it and stop telling themselves a bullshit story about how overwhelmed they are.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is when you're telling yourself that story of overwhelm, your unconscious mind is listening and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we're giving you too much. Okay. Like, we'll just take that off your plate. Okay. Like, it listens. And so when you're telling yourself a story of overwhelm, a story of this is so hard, this is so challenging, your unconscious mind is just agreeing with you because it loves you. It wants to serve you. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. Well, yeah, this is hard. Okay, let's bring either some more hard in, or let's bring some more, like, let's maybe take some things off the plate. Maybe not going for that multi-6-figure business because because obviously it's too much at 5 figures. So looking at where are you telling yourself a story of overwhelm. And this is it's a hard one to swallow because I mean, I was a new mom with a baby that I had some initial trauma in that first year dealing with some postpartum stuff, as well as trying to grow a business. And there I was working with a coach who with such good intentions, but like, just write your goals, declare them. And I'm like,
you're like, dude, I can't find a pen. Yeah.
Like, because I'm like, I have $1 million goal. And I was balancing 2 levels of responsibility of both being like a business owner and being a new mom, which the first time around, it's scary.
It's a nice slap upside the head, just as far as like day-to-day reality, right? It is just
daily reality. Yeah. Like
different. Yeah.
This whole concept of like, oh, well, you're going to have your day scheduled and everything batched. And then until the infant cries, and then you have to adapt.
Or get sick or doesn't sleep.
Or get sick or whatnot. Yeah.
I think that part of it though, that you are pointing to with the manifesting, right? And the like, write the big goal, but really understanding, gosh, we keep coming back to this, don't we? Where the human being is in the process. And again, it's leading us right back to acceptance again, right? We've got to accept the truth of where we are in order to be able to move forward and to try to do it on top of that, or to do the SMART goals when you're not sleeping. I mean, it's like, it's not going to work. It's just never going to happen. I love that you're telling the truth about this and just pointing to this like this. I don't think there are enough people out there, I call it our shared humanity, talking about our shared humanity like this. And I think it's so critical for people to hear it, especially when they see that you've been able to turn that around. Didn't stay there forever, people.
Didn't stay there forever.
Yeah.
But it also comes back to that place that I did with bulimia. I committed to the commitment of doing what it takes until it took.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I eliminated this arbitrary timeline that I had to achieve this, and that before I was whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those arbitrary deadlines. Yes, deadlines are important as a business owner. It's a yes and, it's not an either or. Yes, deadlines are important and realistic. Like I'm not the biggest fan of realism because I know how fast like life can transform like that. Like this past 2022 was freaking hard, and already in 2023 we've made like we're only two full months into 2023. We've made half of our revenue that we made last year. Like, so it can change like that. Mm-hmm. And it comes with looking at what is the level of responsibility that you're able to hold on to right now. Mm-hmm. And if you're struggling, and like, look at the word, like responsibility, like, are you able to, from a place of acceptance and peace and like joy for what you've been given, be able to respond in the moment to the next thing? Like, I mean, I love that Sarah, like right before our, like hopping on, you're like, I got to respond to this thing. Like, and I was like, totally mom to mom, we get it. Like, but it was a level of response. Mm-hmm. And I think that the problem is especially when like, I wasn't trained in responding. I was trained in reacting when I was a child.
Such a difference.
And there's a huge difference with, what actually physiologically happens in your nervous system when you react. That's your sympathetic nervous system going, holy crap, there's fear, there's danger, like fire. When really, like, you just lit a candle, you're okay. Yes. Like there's a fire, but it's contained.
Right. The difference between responding versus reacting. That is gorgeous, Kimberly. I love that. Oh my gosh. I have a feeling there's somebody listening or watching who was like, oh, I just did that yesterday. Right. That feeling of like, oh yeah, that's what I did. It's so great to recognize. So how much power there is in that. Like that is so powerful, and it's catchy, and it's almost meme-esque. Like we could make a meme out of that. Like don't react, respond. But the depth of that, the power of that is really, I want to use the word profound, but it's really profound when we sit back and recognize that is all of our power. It's the old, is it Deepak Chopra? I'm not sure. In between the stimulus and the response, there's a space.
There's a space, there's choice.
And in that space lies your power, right?
That's like, Viktor Frankl.
Ah, that's right. Viktor Frankl. Yes. Thank you for that. That's absolutely correct. I was like, that's not right what I said. Anyway, no, but I think that's so looked over. Like we just have consumed that so much we forget that our entire lives are built out of that space. Mm-hmm. And the difference between reacting and responding in that moment is everything. Oh my gosh, Kimberly, this has just been such a joy chatting with you today. If someone's listening and they're like, oh my good grief, I need to get me some more of the Kimberly, where can people find you?
You can head on over to crownyourself.com and just click the button that says work with me. And I'd love to have a chat with you.
Love it. I love it. Simple and straightforward. You guys hear that? Very simple, very straightforward. Kimberly, it has been such a joy. I hope we get to talk again soon. And thank you for spending time with the Game On Girlfriend podcast today.
I would love to spend time again, Sarah. You are such a joy. I love what you're bringing to this world and how straightforward you are kicking people's assets into high gear.
Thanks, Kimberly. Bye.